Hello, everybody. Eddie Webb. We are here back at the new Media Lab at Mesa Community College. We are continuing our discussion with Dr. Craig Jacobsen, the chair of the English department. And we've been talking about the systemic implications of being complicit around some of these issues of social justice and racial relations. And a few things we want to kind of cover in this episode is the 2004 bond. I want to talk also about accreditation standards from outside agencies that bring legitimacy to particular certificates. And if we can, we want to talk about selective admissions. And I think it's very important to always talk about these things in terms of the layers or, how they correlate within a Venn diagram, so to speak, of how these things overlap for opportunity, access, all of these really amazing dynamics at work, economics and culture, very fascinating stuff. But we want to talk about the 2004 bond that was passed here in Maricopa that was meant to support increasing student enrollment. And I think it did have a little bit of construction, new build in there, but it was primarily of how this bond could support programs to increase enrollment. So let's start there, Craig. What do you think about that?
Sure.
Just throw all of that on your lap real quick.
Right. So we're going back a ways, right? Historically, 2004 gets farther away every minute. But somebody out there listening to this is smiling because they know the 2004 bond is a little bit of a thing for me. So, just really quickly, a lot of the bond money that the college was given was for construction, right? We had an aging campus. We had facilities that weren't really keeping up with not just projected student growth, but even the students we had, right? Things get old, things wear out, things need to be refreshed. It's hard for community colleges, the way they're budgeted, to afford new construction or serious renovations. And so the bond issue was really meant to serve those needs, and I think they did that remarkably well. We have our new student services mall facilities to thank for, the bond money to thank for some of that. But the part of it that gets me is that if you go back through Mesa Community College's list of things that were supposed to get built, the only thing that didn't get built was the English classroom building, right? So given that I spent a lot of time in building committee meetings, first of all, planning out a 3-story classroom and office building, and then as the budget shrank, a 2-story classroom and office building, and then a classroom building, and then a remodel of the building we have now with no new classrooms and no additional office space. It's, it's always been a bit of a thing for me. And one of the things that I've come to realize about that is I think really it's an example of institutionalized assumptions that, despite the good intentions of everyone involved, can potentially be seen as, institutionalized racism. Because if you look at where the money was spent and when it was spent, and you kind of do the analysis that we talked about before, which is where do the resources go and who do they serve, the foundational departments, English, math, and reading, really didn't see much of that bond money. We built some gorgeous new buildings in the STEM areas that they needed. But I would argue that there are features of those buildings that weren't entirely necessary and that frankly consumed much of the budget that would have gone to a classroom building for English that would have allowed us to, say, have computers in all of our writing classrooms.
Yes, but we do have a second theater building.
Well, and then there's that. But, I think that at the time we were making those decisions, we were probably not particularly mindful that those were equity decisions, right? That they were certainly improvements were necessary, right? Aging labs, that sort of stuff. You have to refresh that stuff. But I think that people in their enthusiasm for what seemed like a really substantial pot of money, and it was millions of dollars, overspent some of that money, and were allowed to overspend some of that money at the expense of a department like English, which frankly serves pretty close to every student who comes to this college, right? And that's, yes, I am biased because I am a longtime member and currently chair of the English department. But, when you look at English, math, and reading, these are departments that really serve the broad cross-section of our students. And they are, from one perspective, they offer gateway courses that help students enter college, learn what it is to be a college student, have a taste of success, or gatekeeping courses, which are the places where students go to fail and potentially not come back to the college. So they're really, the research is pretty clear that these are pivotal locations, especially for first generation students. And in fact, they won't progress on to take those advanced classes if they can't successfully get through their foundational courses. So I think we really need, moving forward, if we ever find that kind of pot of money, to not only look at, what's oldest and most in need of refurbishment, but what students are we willing to back with those investments? They pretty much gutted our building in the remodel, which is great. It needed it. But I remember the conversations about making them all computer ready. And that involved cutting channels in the concrete so that the electrical and network cabling could be run. Only about half of our classrooms got that because it was deemed too expensive to make all of them computer ready. Right? I can't really imagine a similar conversation in some of these other disciplines, where what's really industry standard equipment, like if you're going to write in the late 20th or early 21st century, you're doing it on a computer. We're not providing that to students in the class where we purport to be teaching them to be 21st century writers. So, even something as kind of archaic as that, the 2004 bond, how that was spent out, I think reflects an old model of thinking that just reinscribed inequities. I do believe that we are moving past that. I think we have a lot of work to do to actually move past those patterns of thought, because I think we still like the flagship or newsworthy kinds of things. And honestly, getting students through first year composition or their first math class isn't going to get you much in the way of headlines, not in the way a really architecturally dynamic, new, shiny building does, for example.
It's like picking an old scab. I mean,
it is.
Why?
And it's,
I mean, as you describe this process, and you try to make these connections, right, to what that means for students. This was a huge, and as you say, all of those people are gone, right? Who make all these decisions. But we clearly had a articulation and an agreement to build out the English department. I think we had even some plans drawn on
yes.
a couple floors.
Yes.
Which, I mean, it's mind-boggling that we ended up building out a building performing arts center that I guess the idea was, well, we could rent it out and create revenue in that way. But that's not what everyone agreed upon. And when we talk about being complicit, this is where I see this dynamic at work, because the people that were in charge, that we said, hey, you need to speak up, right, and dig in and fight and all of that, wouldn't do it, right, because they have their eye on the next job, right? They're trying to work up in this system, and they don't want to be the troublemaker, right? They don't want to cause waves. And so it didn't get done. We got some fresh paint
right.
and some little more centralized offices for faculty.
We got a lobby for students that seats about 6.
Lobby for students, but what we wanted was to build out again this state-of-the-art language arts center, right? And we still need to do that.
Yes.
I mean, it's just unbelievable that you have a department that brings in the majority of the revenue that drives the rest of the college, got the least amount out of that bond, right? And so no accountability. It happened. The people that were in charge are all gone now. We have now we have cuts instead of investment money. And we've got to figure these economic challenges out. And next time when we do that, we have to make sure that people are held account, right? Like, because you can't go through what we did, which was planning meetings. I think we had blueprints, actually. Didn't we get
we
sketches?
We had early drawings, yes.
Early drawings. And it made complete sense that had we bolstered up those programs and that we could have increased student enrollment. We'll never know now, of course, but don't get me started. All right. Any more on the bond that you want to talk about? Or I'm really interested in this accreditation stuff.
Yeah, the bond stuff is just an example, and I try to look for examples that are really systemic, right? I don't think there was any ill will or any desire to deny anything of anybody in that process. It's just, if you're not, you don't see what you're not looking for. And I don't think at that stage institutionally we were really looking for, and I'm not sure now we always are looking for, what the equity implications of resource allocations are, right? And this is the difficult thing. We have to examine a lot of core assumptions about how we do what we do. So you mentioned we have a handful of programs at the college that have outside accreditation, and they're programs that we all can be proud of, right? There's a lot of work that's involved in getting that accreditation. It demonstrates that we're capable of being nationally and internationally competitive. But one of the systemic implications of that, because most accreditation processes involve demonstrating certain degrees of resource allocation from your institution, right? Minimum staffing levels, physical facilities, up-to-date software or tools or whatever it is, right? So this is the nature of getting accredited. You demonstrate you have these things, and in return you get accreditation. Functionally within the institution, what that means is that when push comes to shove, those programs get privileged over programs that do not have or do not require outside accreditation, right? Because we don't have something to point to say we must have this level of staffing, or we must have computers in every writing classroom, or we must have, right? And so that's just systemically, it's not the fault of the people who are doing the work to get accredited. It's simply that we have to recognize that perhaps if you make resource allocations without being mindful of the advantages of those programs, you are just going to continually deprioritize the programs that serve the broadest number of students.
Well, I think what it speaks to is a disconnect. And again, from Kendall's book, they write about, we are so removed from others' reality that we are kept from seeing the classism involved in our assumptions, right?
Yes.
So what you're talking about, this access to students who need access, right, who are not necessarily come from privileged type economic communities, that disconnect was not involved in that assumption, right? That people didn't consider more access to, even if we brought reading into the English department, the new building, what we could have had to build that community and build out all of the resources you're talking, it would make it more attractive and more modern for students to come. There wasn't that consideration.
Right.
I mean, we're making an assumption that there wasn't a consideration, but what we know is that We were allocated the money. We had an agreement. It didn't happen. It went somewhere else. And what does these new buildings, where do they serve in helping people along, right? And so as we can discuss these things now because we actually have factual evidence of, and this isn't trying to pin, like you say, this isn't trying to pin something on somebody. We're not trying to do it. We're just discussing how this can work systematically without careful thoughts and having the right people at the table to bring up these issues during these decisions, right? That's the next layer.
And if you're not mindful, or if you don't have somebody in the room who's mindful of these things, the system will run itself.
That's right.
Right? The system will run itself, and because of the way the system is built, it will privilege the things that it was built to privilege. Right? Every system is, I can't remember I've seen this ascribed to a lot of different people, but I really like this quote. Every system is perfectly designed to get the results it produces.
That's right.
We often act like things that happen are glitches, but they're not so much bugs as features, right? The people who are meant to get the resources and support get the resources and support unless we really pay attention, recognize where that's going, and work to redirect it if that's what's necessary.
Yeah, and I think some of that was sort of the change of the last president we had. He was trying to he'd tell me that he'd meet with the enrollment advisement committee, right, and then at 10 o'clock, and then at 12 o'clock he had a meeting with the building committee, and he said he would get up from one room and walk into the other. It's like everybody, the same people would just get up and walk from one room to the next. It'd be the same people. There was no diversity, among, you have these same folks that kind of have a grip on power and influence. And so therefore you just have these same outcomes over and over and over and over. I think that's one of the things we're starting to see over here, which I really like, right? Is to say no to that core group think, having ownership of all of the community, and giving staff voice, giving students voice, giving faculty who haven't traditionally felt welcomed into those groups, because nobody wants to bring up, it's always difficult to bring up these issues, even though those of us charged with bringing them up must. Otherwise, it falls on the shoulders of our students, right? And we don't want that. But I think I'm very optimistic that in the future, that's what we're doing. We're bringing in more voices at the table so things like this don't slip through the cracks, so to speak, right?
Oh, I think that's definitely true. We're already on that trajectory. I know, over the last 5 years, but even far more intensely over the last 3.
Yeah.
I have been in lots of rooms where there was very intentional discussion about making sure that membership was expanded or shuffled to like a lot more consideration of those concerns to get a broader view in the room. And if you do that, you can't help but recognize the value of that. If you allow folks, and you make some excellent points there. It's not just about race and gender. It's also about employment status. It's also, just a whole range of things. And I would agree with you that we are doing much better on that. Certainly there's always room for improvement, but that I think has been one of the great institutional and even systemic changes in the last few years.
Yeah, it's a good sign that we're healthy enough to take inventory on the things that we need to improve on, and then, create initiatives that allow that process to happen. So, I think given our shortcomings, I think that the future is very, very exciting, especially when we get the right leaders involved, like yourself, who are willing to step up and say, because we can't always stay stuck in the diagnosis. Right.
Yeah.
And a lot of times that's how I've felt. And I just decided to stop. I'm into the inherent educational sovereignty part for me. Like, I work really hard with my own tribe doing things because I don't see the value in fighting with some of the dynamics here. I just don't know why, it benefits anybody at the end of the day. Not me personally, professionally, or students. I think we've created this space and we just move ahead. Right?
Mhm.
Let's move ahead with doing what we're doing, and I think that's working. So as we move from the talking about the 2004 bond and accreditation standards from outside agencies, we've talked a little bit about this idea of onboarding faculty and an assumption that we assume that they have gotten the kind of diverse training that we are trying to foster here at Mesa. And maybe that assumption is not always true. And so we're talking about training models that we can provide within our department as we hire someone. So with two things there. One, we wouldn't necessarily have that in the job description, or we would, and then we would evaluate it. And then two, is it acculturating somebody into the kind of department we want to have? Is that what we're talking about?
I'd even back it up a step.
Okay.
So one of the things I've noticed in my 4.5 years almost as chair is that, well, let's talk about adjunct faculty since, that's, until the pandemic, I was in an almost constant low grade hiring mode, right? We lose adjunct faculty, they get better jobs, they move, so I'm always, at least on a small scale, hiring adjunct faculty. What I've noticed is that the traditional route that I went through, probably you went through, a lot of our colleagues went through, was that we initially got our college level teaching training and experience as teaching assistants, probably in a graduate program, right?
Right.
There's graduate TA seminar. You may have had some training a few weeks in the summer before you first started teaching. You got some oversight. You got observed. You got some mentoring, all that stuff, right?
I went through Dwayne Rowan's rhetoric program at ASU. Phenomenal program.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So our assumption for a long time was that somebody would train our faculty before they got here because we didn't have anything to offer them. As comprehensive onboarding or even pre-onboarding, right? Before, you get a class. I think that raises a number of issues. I think it's always been problematic in that if that's the way you operate, then you are relying on those other institutions, universities basically, to have solved some of your diversity problems for you. Right? So you're assuming that they are going to have a diverse enough TA pool that when they then produce them as graduates, right, the community college will have a diverse adjunct faculty hiring pool from that. I don't think the numbers demonstrate that TA pools at universities have historically been sufficiently diverse. Right? So you're automatically in a problematic area if you really do desire a faculty, and it gets even more complex when you start talking about residential faculty. But even if you want just a diverse adjunct faculty pool, I think institutionally you have to do a better job of providing that training. Because at the start of the semester, within the course of 1 week, I got 3 emails from 3 different people who are in online English master's degrees. So they will graduate with the minimum qualifications necessary to teach in the district, but with 0 teaching experience and probably 0 explicit training. 2 of them at least were in literature, and so they wouldn't have probably gotten much coursework in teaching writing. This is increasingly the case, right? I have people who come asking about teaching opportunities who meet minimum qualifications, but who I would not put in front of a class because I don't think it would be fair to students to have somebody completely untrained. We've done a lot in our department under Alex Aragin, the previous writing program administrator, and Mike Calloway, the current writing program administrator, with a lot of help from colleagues like our evening chair, Leanna Hall, to provide a lot of support for new faculty. But it's still set up in a way that presumes we'll hire you first, right? And I would love it if the district, because I think you really need to leverage the economies of scale that you might get at the district level, to have an academy of sorts to help prepare people who have minimum qualifications, but maybe not the qualifications you desire to put them in front of a classroom, to get them there before you assign them a class. Because our centers for teaching and learning are for current employees, right? So there's a bit of a catch-22 there. And I think if we really want to diversify our faculty, it starts with diversifying adjunct faculty who, with experience, training, and opportunity, potentially become our residential faculty, right? We can't keep offshoring the diversification of our hiring pipeline and assuming it's just going to take care of itself eventually if we just write a good enough job ad or we just whatever, right? We have to take on that work for ourselves if we really value it.
I think we have to figure out how to streamline that kind of thinking and that kind of those sorts of programs. The problem is, as the military guys always say, there's only so many seats at the table, Gunny, right? So we can't make promises to people as we think about how to have a teacher training. It seems like we used to have a summer program where we brought English teachers to spend, a few weeks with us doing workshops and training. I don't know if we still do that kind of stuff anymore. Seems like Jeff, our chair, a few years back, used to host a program. Maybe it was just a daily thing where he invited people over to see what we do and see if they were interested in applying for, if we had full-time or adjunct positions open, But I love that idea, and I hear what you're saying too about the CTL is accessible to people that currently work here. What do you think? Is there opportunities for us to create a summer bridge program for adjunct faculty? I mean, we do have 10 campuses that they, if we even trained people here, we could still benefit at one of our campuses. And at the end of the day, they could, it would just benefit education overall if we started a track. But that's a big undertaking, yeah, to start a.
It is a big undertaking,
track, yeah.
And I've talked to other folks about this, and everyone recognizes the need, and lots of folks have thoughts about how we could do that. Like you say, at the district level, I mean, it's very narrow view to imagine that Mesa's English adjunct faculty are confined to Mesa, right? So the start of this semester, I got contacted by Scottsdale's English chair and asked if we had anybody who, needed some classes. And really all of us on sort of this half of the valley freely exchange and help our adjunct faculty to be as fully employed as we can get them. Right. So it really is a Maricopa pool, and I think it would be a Maricopa investment.
Yeah.
And I think it is doable. We're fortunate if we're talking about first year composition, we operate on such a scale that I think it's worth the investment.
Right.
But I think the issue of the diversity of hiring pipelines is at least as intense in disciplines and sub-disciplines that don't operate at a scale that might get those resources devoted to them.
Right. And those models exist because I went through the Chair Academy through the district, right? But, was a program, at least there's a model, that the district does fund. It's an outside agency that we contract, and faculty that have ambitions to run for a chair position go through this program, get a big wall plaque thing. So the model is there. We should be doing more.
Oh, yeah. We have the expertise.
We're trying. I mean,
we are.
COVID threw everything on hold, but we are trying to start a new Media Lab Academy, that we can host here and bring faculty from all 10 campuses and run them through like a 2-week program to show them the workings of what we do, outside of Spark.
Mm-hmm.
And we've done some workshops. It was really popular, and it seemed like we were doing really well till we couldn't come back to school. Right? I'm sure a lot of people are experiencing the same thing. But I love this idea of internal training, and also not to make this assumption that other institutions are providing this training for us so that we benefit from, I think it'd be really amazing to have a camp that's, is specific to equity and inclusion. I think it'd be remarkable.
I agree.
So anyway, we're really grateful to have Craig here. Craig, is there any last words you'd like to share with our listeners?
I think just to be willing to sit with the discomfort of, for those of us who are in positions like mine of a fair amount of unearned privilege, of course that's disquieting to realize and to continue to find new depths of that, right? But if you're going to be both intellectually and ethically honest with yourself, I think you just have to live with the discomfort sometimes and recognize that it also comes with the opportunity to at least contribute to reducing those inequities.
Yeah, I agree. We hope you all have enjoyed listening to our podcast with Dr. Craig Jacobsen, the chair of the English department here at Mesa Community College. I know I really feel inspired by the things I've learned today. We just want to encourage everyone to take care of each other out there and be good to each other. And I think we have a bright future ahead of us here at Mesa Community College, and we'll see y'all soon.